What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at the perfect theoretical mock draft, and honestly this is one of my favorite exercises to go ahead and do every single year because it allows me to make every single pick for every roster in a 12-team full-point PPR format throughout 8 rounds. Now our rosters will include a quarterback, 2 RBs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a flex, and a bench spot, and I do think 8 rounds will be plenty to go ahead and construct the core of our rosters and allow us to evaluate how we did. Now, as we go, a quick note, I will include the bye week next to each player selection just for a little bit more information. But other than that, that's all you need to know. However, before we get into it, a quick reminder, if you haven't already, get yourself a copy of the 2019 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Check out the description for more information, but it's got the top 150 overall player rankings in standard and PPR formats, individual player bios and projections, along with draft advice for standard and auction drafts and more, all at a great price. So again, check out the description and get yourself a copy now. But let's go ahead and kick things off. And starting things off, we have Team 1 selecting Saquon Barkley with the first pick. And at this point in time, I think this is the logical choice because if it was a couple weeks ago, I'd have Zeke in this conversation. But since he is still in that contract dispute with the Dallas Cowboys, and it's a question mark, even though I think it'll get sorted out by the start of week 1. We have to give Barkley the edge here. I did consider McCaffrey, I did consider Kamara, but I give Barkley the edge purely because I think him and Zeke are probably the favorites for the rushing crown. So they have higher rushing ceilings in my eyes than C-Mac and Kamara. We know what Barkley could do as a pass catcher, and I think you could go ahead and maybe expect some improvement there considering that Odell Beckham is gone. Then going in number 2, we have got Christian McCaffrey. Look, this is really close, whether it's McCaffrey or Alvin Kamara. The only reason I prefer McCaffrey, and it's only by a little, is because I think potentially Latavius Murray might vulture more opportunities from Alvin Kamara than Cam Newton might for McCaffrey. So I think he just might be, again, a slight hair safer than Alvin Kamara. Then at number 3, we do have the aforementioned Alvin Kamara, who, again, even though he's going off at number 3, I think he will be an elite fantasy stud at the running back position. We've seen him do just that, even with Mark Ingram there the last 2 seasons. So we obviously know that he can go ahead and do it no matter who is playing beside him. He is the featured guy on an offense that is run first and scores points week in and week out. Then at number 4, we've got Ezekiel Elliott. Look, I'm not letting Zeke fall outside of the top 4 guys. I think he is absolutely an elite back that will get signed by week 1. All signs are pointing to that. We pretty much every single day get more and more news that him and the Cowboys are getting closer to those Todd Gurley numbers. And again, the Cowboys need this guy if they want to contend. He is their most important offensive piece, even more important than Dak Prescott. I think that offensive line is great, and I think Zeke will be great behind it. I think we can see similar numbers to what we saw last season, but more so towards the end of the season when the Cowboys figured out how to use Zeke consistently. So for that reason, I have him here at number 4. Then at number 5, I've got David Johnson, who, even though maybe struggled a little bit in the preseason along with the Cardinals offense, I think that the Cardinals will pick it up a little bit in the regular season. Look, it might not necessarily translate to wins for the Cardinals, but I do think it'll translate to fantasy success, especially with Kyler Murray now running the show there. Maybe I wouldn't be so optimistic about David Johnson if Josh Rosen was still there, but I think Kyler Murray more so meshes with what David Johnson can do to succeed. I think there's going to be a lot of dinks and dumps going to David Johnson, which will kind of go ahead and provide him a safer floor, especially in PPR formats. Then in team number 6 selection, we have Davante Adams, our first wide receiver off the board. Instead of going with maybe a little bit of a questionable running back, we go with a safe wide receiver who is elite and probably the best wide receiver for this fantasy season, at least in my eyes. The reason I say that is because after his breakout season last year in 2018, where Aaron Rodgers wasn't fully healthy and Davante Adams didn't really have that much help beside him, I think Adams can go ahead and improve on his numbers. Hell, Aaron Rodgers has said that he wants to get the ball more to Davante Adams, and even without guys next to him, he still dominated last season, so I think he can go ahead and do that versus opposing defenses again in 2019. Then Team 7 takes Julio Jones. I love Julio Jones. I think he's on one of the best offenses in the NFL. I've been on the record saying that. I think the Falcons will be the best offense this season, and Julio Jones will be a big reason why. I know probably a lot of people are in arms that DeAndre Hopkins isn't here, but when it comes to the elite wide receivers that, again, I think will be very close in terms of production, I look at the quarterback position to go ahead and differentiate between these three guys, and I think we can safely say that Matt Ryan and Aaron Rodgers are in a league of their own compared to Deshaun Watson. That's why Julio Jones is the pick here. But don't worry, we don't wait long, as the next selection is DeAndre Hopkins. I think he still will be an elite wide receiver, even with Deshaun Watson there. Hell, if Deshaun Watson takes that next step as a passer, DeAndre Hopkins could very well be the #1 overall fantasy wide receiver. Good value here. And again, both these guys, whether it's Julio Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, again, throw Devontae Adams into that conversation, all these guys will be elite. So in whatever order you get them, I think you can't go wrong. Then Team 9, we're going with another wide receiver I'm very high on this year, Michael Thomas. And we've got 2 New Orleans Saints going in the first round, but when you've got an offense that's as potent as that of the New Orleans Saints, it makes sense. And Michael Thomas, it's no coincidence that he led the NFL in receptions last season. The guy catches everything thrown at him, and I think he can go ahead and do the exact same this season. Even though the Saints are run first, Michael Thomas is the first option for Drew Brees, and it's not even close. He doesn't make many mistakes, and like I said, he pretty much catches everything thrown at him. I love him in PPR formats. Then team number 10, we are going back to the running back position with Le'Veon Bell coming off the board. Even though I don't like Le'Veon Bell's situation, I don't love the New York Jets offense, that offensive line, compared to what Bell had with the Steelers, and I don't think we can go ahead and expect to see the same type of success Bell had in Pittsburgh to what we'll see now with the New York Jets. I still think in PPR formats, and this is the key, that he will have a safe floor because of all the targets that he will get, all the dinks and dumps, similar to a David Johnson. For that reason, he is the pick here. Next, we have got Joe Mixon. And look, I'm a big fan of Mixon. I think in a year or two, we're going to be talking about Mixon as a top 5 running back. I kind of said the same thing last season about him. He had that breakout performance. And keep in mind, he didn't play 2 games last season, so he could have done even better. Now, I know a lot of people aren't fans of that Cincinnati offense. They've lost guys on the offensive line. It's tough. AJ Green, he's going to be out for a while. But I think in spite of that, Joe Mixon will still be a great running back. I think he will improve as a pass catcher, which is a big reason why I'm high on him this season. Then with the last selection in the first round, we have got Todd Gurley. That's right. I know there's those reports about the arthritis in the knee, but I still think even Gurley at 75 to 85% of what he has been these last 2 seasons deserves to be a first round pick. I love that offense for the Rams. As long as Sean McVay is there, I think they will put up points, and I do think Todd Gurley will be a big reason why. It's not even close, the fall off in talent between Todd Gurley and the next couple of running backs. So again, I do think that he will see a larger usage than some people might expect. Then getting to round number 2, we're going Dalvin Cook, pairing him up with Todd Gurley. Look, let's go ahead and acknowledge that the arthritis in the knee, again, it's an issue, even though I think Gurley will outperform the expectations. But in case you're worried about it, let's go ahead and pair Todd Gurley up with another running back that I think will be great this season. I love Dalvin Cook. I think the Vikings improved that offensive line. And we saw it last season after they made their change with offensive coordinators and Dalvin Cook was healthy. He was dominating. He's an underrated pass catcher. Latavius Murray isn't there anymore. The Vikings want to be a little bit more run heavy to limit the mistakes Kirk Cousins makes. I think Dalvin Cook will go ahead and reap the benefits of that, not only as a great rusher, but also as a great pass catcher. Next, we're adding James Conner to that Joe Mixon selection. And James Conner, even though I could see him regressing from last season, just because I think Jalen Samuels is a very good pass catcher, it's hard not to love James Conner's situation behind that offensive line and behind that offense in Pittsburgh. We saw the usage last season, and if he could have stayed healthy for the entirety of the year, he'd probably be a higher selection at this point in time. Next, we have got Juju Smith-Schuster. We addressed the running back position in the first round. Now we're going our next best available wide receiver. And I do think that Juju Smith will, after this season, be in the conversation of top 5 wide receivers for a while the next couple of years, because he has been the favorite target for Big Ben pretty much since he came into the league after Antonio Brown. But if you look at it, he's been kind of up and coming, especially last season. He pretty much beat out Antonio Brown in every single category other than touchdowns, yardage, receptions. And he's going to be the go-to guy for Big Ben this season. He's shown us he's consistent his first 2 seasons. For everyone that's worried about him beating coverages now that AB is no longer there, I point to Davante Adams. Look what he did, how he broke out, and he still dominated defenses with a lot of without a lot of help across from him. I think Juju Smith can go ahead and do the same. Then we have got Tyreek Hill here, pairing him up with the previously drafted Michael Thomas. So going 2 wide receivers right from the get-go, probably could potentially haunt us on the way back in the 3rd round, but I think Tyreek Hill is the next best player available. And behind Patrick Mahomes, knowing that Tyreek Hill will be there for the entirety of the season, behind that offense with Andy Reid, we know how high scoring can be. I still think Patrick Mahomes will probably be the #1 fantasy scoring quarterback. It's tough not to like Tyreek Hill. Big play guy, even though he can be somewhat inconsistent. When you consider how consistent Michael Thomas is, this is a pick that I feel pretty good about. Next, we have got Odell Beckham. So now back-to-back 2 teams going wide receiver. And I think, again, it comes back to, well, the running backs that we normally consider here might have some more question marks. So Odell is the choice. Even though he is on the Cleveland Browns and there's a lot of mouths to feed, I still think Odell will be an elite wide receiver. I think he still gets you over 1,000 yards, hell, even over 1,100, 1,200 yards. The big thing for him is he has to stay healthy, and as long as the Browns don't kind of self-destruct due to all the egos there, I think Odell Beckham will be a fine wide receiver #1. Next, we are drafting Aaron Jones. That's right, guys. I'm very high on Aaron Jones this year. We got our wide receiver 1 here, and I'm going to go ahead and say Aaron Jones will be an RB1. We saw it last season that he is without a doubt the guy that should be handling the rock for the Green Bay Packers. With a healthy Aaron Rodgers, with a good offensive line, with an improved defense, I think Aaron Jones is going to have a great season. And I think a lot of people are kind of sleeping on him. We've heard coaches say that they want to involve their running backs more in the passing game. So again, that's another big plus for Aaron Jones in PPR formats. Then we're going Devonta Freeman next. And again, you might consider this a reach, but I see Devonta Freeman staying healthy. And again, on an offense that I think will be one of the best in the NFL with an improved offensive line. That should mean now, again, with no Tevin Coleman, Freeman should have more opportunities. We forget that, before these last 2 seasons where he struggled with injuries, Freeman was one of the best running backs, one of the best dual threat running backs at that. So I'm willing to take a chance on Freeman at this point in time. Next, we're going Mike Evans. We already got our running back 1. Let's go ahead and get another wide receiver top 10 option here, which I think Mike Evans definitely is. Jameis Winston will be throwing the rock a bunch, and I think Mike Evans will be a big beneficiary. No more Deshaun Jackson, no more Adam Humphries. Obviously, Chris Godwin and OJ Howard will get theirs, but Mike Evans is at the top of that pecking order, so I think that'll translate to a top 10 wide receiver finish. Then we're going ahead and adding Travis Kelce to that Zeke pick next. Travis Kelce right now, probably the next best pass catcher. That's why he is my next selection. You can make the case for some other wide receivers, maybe an Antonio Brown, cough, but I just think, again, Travis Kelce, a little bit safer, not as much drama, so that's why he is the selection here. Pretty much doubles as a wide receiver 1. Next, we have got Nick Chubb. We pair him with Alvin Kamara, and I've said this before. Nick Chubb, the player, I love. If Kareem Hunt hadn't joined the Cleveland Browns, I'd be thinking of Nick Chubb as a first-round selection, but because of the fact that when Kareem Hunt returns, Nick Chubb's ceiling will drastically fall, I have him as an end of the 2nd round, maybe even early 3rd round selection. Just however, at this point in time, I couldn't resist pairing up 2 running backs and potentially worrying about wide receivers afterwards, depending on what's available. But even though Chubb might be risky, again, when you consider pairing him up with Alvin Kamara, it eases that risk in my eyes. Next, we have got Antonio Brown here. We got our running back one with Christian McCaffrey. Let's go ahead and add a wide receiver one. Honestly, I would have had Antonio Brown go earlier, but just because of all this drama that's been surrounding him, I've docked him a couple of spots. But don't get me wrong. Even though people might question this guy's sanity, no one is questioning his talent. And again, in PPR formats, I think he has got a relatively safe floor because he will get targets up the wazoo. That Raiders offense doesn't have that many options, so Antonio Brown will be the featured guy. I don't think he'll necessarily have the success that he did in Pittsburgh, obviously, but I do think he will produce for fantasy purposes. And then finishing off their second round, we have got Damien Williams. Personally, I think Damien Williams is going to be a little bit of a steal in terms of ADP because, reports have been coming out, timeshare, blah, 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 the hamstring injury, but in terms of both accounts, Damien Williams has seemed to come back from the hamstring and looked good. He's gotten a lot of usage with the number ones, and he's had the most success out of all the running backs. So I do think Andy Reid stays with the hot hand. The worry here would be if Damien Williams gets injured, because if that happens, then we could potentially see a fallout where he struggles to regain his starting spot. But again, as of right now, he's the number one guy in Kansas City, a great offense, and that's what we're drafting him as. Next, we go to round 3, and here we see another running back selection for Team 1 in Kerryon Johnson. We're going with our first 3 picks, 3 running backs. Kerryon Johnson, the next guy up, someone that has been skyrocketing up draft boards because of the opportunity he's expected to have in Detroit. And look, while I don't necessarily disagree with that, I will say I might have him a little bit lower here than what some people might expect just because of the hesitation I have with the Detroit offense. I don't 100% believe in Matt Patricia. He's got more of that defensive background. There's CJ Anderson still there. But I think at this point in time, getting this trio of running backs was just too tough to pass up on. Next, we're going Adam Thielen, another wide receiver that I think is getting overlooked a little bit considering what he's done the last 2 seasons. I think in PPR formats, he is the wide receiver that you want to focus on out of him and Stephon Diggs. Pair him up with Antonio Brown, who's a little bit risky. Thielen, a very safe wide receiver one, mid-level, low-end wide receiver one that I'm very happy with here at the start of the 3rd round. Next, we're going Keenan Allen. And we already got our 2 running backs. Let's go ahead and get a wide receiver one because I know if we wait on it longer, the talent is going to drop off drastically. And Keenan Allen, another guy similar to Adam Thielen, thrives in PPR formats. He's expected to be ready for week 1, even with that ankle issue. And depending on what happens with Melvin Gordon, how long he potentially stays out, if at all, Keenan Allen could benefit in that department in terms of targets. Next, we are going Leonard Fournette here. Already got Zeke, already got Travis Kelce. Let's recognize Zeke could potentially be a small question mark, so let's add Leonard Fournette, another running back. He's my next best available running back, and I know a lot of people are worried about Leonard Fournette, that he is either going to be boom or bust. I haven't heard too many people say, kind of in the middle about Fournette, but I like what Nick Foles brings to that offense in terms of balance. I think that defense will bounce back, and I think we could see a similar type of year from Fournette in terms of what he did his rookie season. Next, we're going Chris Carson with Team 5. Early parts of the 3rd round, but Chris Carson, another running back that has seen his ADP rise, and I'm right on board with that because Seattle is a run-first team, and Chris Carson clearly better than Rashad Penny, who has failed to really stand out, and with coaches saying that they want to get Chris Carson more involved in the passing attack, again, that has bells ringing in everyone's mind in PPR formats. That's why you see him being drafted here. Next, we're going David Montgomery. Look, we've got Devonta Freeman as our first running back. in case he gets injured, we know we should start adding more running backs. David Montgomery, I think, will be the top rookie running back out of this draft class. I think he's in a perfect situation in Chicago, even though it might take him a little bit to be that number one guy. I still think he has the highest ceiling, good offensive line. Mitch Trubisky, pretty much just a game manager, so the rushing attack should translate well, especially when you consider that elite defense. Next, we are going Julian Edelman here. We already have Julio Jones, Aaron Jones, so I'm going my next best available player. And in PPR formats, Julian Edelman is a hell of a wide receiver, one of the most consistent wide receivers these last couple of seasons. And if you think about the passing options that Tom Brady will have, Julian Edelman becomes even that more attractive in that sense. I know Josh Gordon, reapplies. He could potentially play week 1, but look, do we really expect Josh Gordon to be available for a full 16 games? It's tough to say yes. I honestly think the next best pass catcher for the Patriots is a running back in James White. So, let that speak for itself. Julian Edelman, I think, is a safe choice here. Next, we're going Marlon Mack, and this is probably the biggest at this point in time debatable pick, because obviously with the Andrew Luck retirement, you have to go ahead and think to yourself, does Marlon Mack deserve to be picked this early? And I had gone through this and started making these selections prior to the Andrew Luck news, and then I went back, reevaluated, and thought to myself, should he be going this early? And considering that 2 wide receivers have been picked so far, you need a running back with a high ceiling. Even though I don't like the Indianapolis Colts offense now, Marlon Mack still has an amazing offensive line, and he's still the starting running back for the Indianapolis Colts. So I'm kind of validating it from that perspective. He'll have the opportunities. So even though I'm begrudgingly making this pick, I think you can kind of defend it just from the opportunities that he will have, even though the Colts probably will struggle this season. Next, we're going Melvin Gordon, another probably pick that could get some flack here, considering Melvin Gordon might be expected to miss some games. But after going 2 wide receivers, we need to go running back. And it's probably safe to say that Team 9 will be going running backs for a while now after this in the next few rounds. But I'm going again for potential, for ceiling. I don't think Melvin Gordon is going to miss the entirety of the season. I even think he's going to play the majority of it. And even though he's probably more likely to miss games than Ezekiel Elliott, look, I'll draft him now, and then I'll get some other running back options afterwards. And then once he comes back, he's going to be inserted into my starting lineup, and I will have 3 pretty much round 1 talented guys, with this being the 3rd round. So I'd be happy about that. Then Team 10, we're going Josh Jacobs here, adding another running back, a guy that, again, has a high ceiling, even though I don't like Josh Jacobs as much as a lot of other people do in the rookie department. I have him after David Montgomery. I think that Josh Jacobs will struggle just because I could see the Raiders being, down in a lot of games and looking to the passing attack more than the rushing attack. But even with that being said, I think he will just get a lot of usage in terms of passes, in terms of rushes, a lot of opportunities is what I'm getting at. So from that perspective, that's why we have got him drafted here. Next, we've got Stefon Diggs. After going 2 running backs, we're going next best available wide receiver. To me, that is Stefon Diggs. I love the Minnesota offense. I really like Adam Thielen. Stefon Diggs, not that much further down the list of my top wide receivers. We've seen him have a lot of success. He did it last season towards the end of the year. I think he is that big play downfield wide receiver for Kirk Cousins whenever he does like to throw that deep ball, and we know that he is prone to do so. So Stefon Diggs, I think at this point in time, good value. Then rounding out round 3, we have got Amari Cooper. Look, we just have to go the next best wide receivers, pretty much the highest ceiling wide receivers after going 2 running backs, and I do think Amari Cooper is that. I know that he's going to be inconsistent from time to time. I know that the Dallas Cowboys don't have the most accurate passer in Dak Prescott, but with that being said, Cooper, I think, is by far the best wide receiver that they have. So even though I recognize this pick comes with some inconsistencies, I am okay with it. Let's go to round 4, and here we have T.Y. Hilton with the first selection. And similar to the Marlon Mack situation, thinking about this pick, I could go ahead and have T.Y. Hilton lower, but just because of the way this draft played out, and with our first 2 picks being running backs and having to hit the wide receiver position hard and going for upside, I'm going Hilton. I know he's not going to have the same ceiling, not even close to what he would have with Andrew Luck. Jacoby Brissett, not in the same conversation, but he's the best wide receiver, and he's going to get the most amount of targets. And I'm going out on a ledge here and saying that he's going to do enough to get you over 1,000 yards, right around that mark. And him and Amari Cooper, not a bad combination considering it's round 3 and 4. Next, we're going to Robert Woods. Robert Woods here, I like the selection in PPR formats. I think he is probably the best wide receiver that the Rams can offer. Usually I would say Cooper Kupp, but I do think he will have a little bit of rust coming back from that season ender in 2018. So I like Robert Woods here as a wide receiver too. Then Team 10 is selecting Zach Ertz. My next best available tight end, in the 4th round, I think this is very good value. A lot of people probably would have selected Zach Ertz by now, but again, I don't want to overvalue the tight end position. I like Zach Ertz. He's the main go-to passing option for Carson Wentz and the Philadelphia Eagles, an offense that likes to pass the ball a lot. I'm not that worried about Dallas Goedert. I don't think he's going to see the field that often with Zach Ertz to really take away Ertz's opportunities. And for that reason, I've got Ertz as my second best tight end. Next, we're going Phillip Lindsay. And this being the team that selected Melvin Gordon, I told you guys, it's going to need to go ahead and make some moves at the running back position. Phillip Lindsay, my next best available running back. Obviously, question marks because of that Denver offense. We don't know how good it's going to be. Joe Flacco under center, new head coach. Is Royce Freeman going to be more involved? But again, considering Melvin Gordon was our first selection, we need to load up on running backs, and Lindsay is the next best available one in my eyes. Next, we're going James White here, another PPR more prone player. Before, we've touched more so on the wide receivers, but here maybe the first running back that kind of falls in this category. I like James White. I said it before. I think he's the second best catcher for the New England Patriots. I think probably he won't have as much success as he did last year, so do keep that in mind. I can make the argument that he should be being selected lower, but since we went with Marlon Mack, our first pick, we need to go for a high upside. If there is an injury to that backfield, James White will benefit again, but if nobody gets injured, everyone stays healthy, White again could see a regression. Next here, we are going Derrick Henry. After going 2 wide receivers and a running back so far, let's hit the next running back slot in Derrick Henry. I know Henry doesn't offer much as a pass catcher, but he does have upside in the touchdown department and in the rushing yard department. I don't like that Tennessee offense. I'm going to go ahead and go on record. I've said that before. I think they're inconsistent, but Derrick Henry does have that yardage, that that touchdown upside that I'm okay taking a shot on him this late in the 4th round. Next, we go George Kittle, and the next best tight end marks the end of the elite tight ends in my eyes. I like George Kittle. I think out of the top 3 tight ends, he might be the most likely to have a little bit of a regression. I know that's an unpopular opinion. A lot of people might say it's Zach Ertz, but I think it's actually Kittle because of just the amount of injuries that the 49ers had last season in the pass catching department. So with those guys returning, and with all those running backs that are great pass catchers, maybe some targets that normally would have gone to Kittle last season now don't. So that's the only reason I say that probably Kittle won't have as much success as he did in 2018. Continuing on, we have Brandon Cooks. After going 2 running backs and a wide receiver, let's go ahead, add another wide receiver to the bunch. The next best available Ram, high upside wide receiver, big play threat down the middle for the Rams. He's definitely that, long touchdown guy for Jared Goff and Sean McVay. So I like Brandon Cooks here as a, high-end wide receiver too. Continuing on, we have got Tyler Boyd as the first wide receiver being added to the bunch here. But again, keep in mind, we added Travis Kelce, who pretty much doubles as a wide receiver 1. I am big on Tyler Boyd this season. Might be a little bit early for him, you might say, but I think he's going to have a lot of opportunities. He's going to be the primary pass catcher while AJ Green is gone. And even when AJ Green returns, I think Boyd will still continue to be a presence. He was so last season when AJ Green was there. Even when he wasn't, he was pretty consistent. And again, with Zach Taylor coming to town, being more of that offensive-minded guy, I think everyone, including Tyler Boyd especially, will benefit from that. Continuing on, we have Chris Godwin, another decent wide receiver 2 option. And I like Godwin, I really do. The reason I have him here is because, like I said before, I think the pecking order will be Mike Evans. I wouldn't be surprised if it's honestly O.J. Howard afterwards, but I still like what Chris Godwin will potentially do. You have to find the reports that, Bruce Arians is saying Godwin's not going to leave the field during the game at all. Pretty optimistic and pretty positive. I don't know if that'll actually be the case, but there definitely will be a lot more targets to go for Godwin after the departures of DeSean Jackson and Adam Humphries. Next, we are going with Patrick Mahomes, and finally we have our first quarterback off the board. At this point in time, I just found it as a value pick. Considering all the other selections that I could have made, I think Patrick Mahomes, is probably going to give you the most points on a week-to-week basis than some of the other selections. So we're going Patrick Mahomes here, who, again, even though I think he will regress, I still have as my number 1 quarterback. And then rounding off round 4, we have Cooper Kupp as the first wide receiver being selected for Team 1 after going 3 straight running backs. I think this is a good value pick. I think when it's all said and done, the 3 wide receivers for the Rams will probably put up similar types of stats. So, I'm not too mad about having Cooper Kupp as my wide receiver 1. Kicking off round 5, we have Calvin Ridley, another wide receiver that I am very high on, probably falls in the wide receiver 2 department. He is the second year, sophomore wide receiver that I am the highest on. Again, this goes back to I really do believe in this Atlanta offense. I think Matt Ryan will put up MVP type numbers. I think this is a situation that's very similar to Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster in Pittsburgh the last few seasons. I think Ridley will benefit from the presence of Julio Jones, and I think he will continue to get better, even though he might have a regression in the touchdown department. I think you will see improvements in receptions and yards. Continuing on, we are adding Mark Ingram to the bunch here. Already had Christian McCaffrey, so I could go ahead and afford to wait on the running back selection and kind of go best available players at other positions. Mark Ingram, might be taking a little bit of a chance, but I do like the ceiling because of just how run heavy the Baltimore Ravens will be between Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram. We'll see what ends up happening, but I do think Mark Ingram, considering how he got paid, will be the bell cow for the Baltimore Ravens. Maybe not every single down, but at least for first, second down, and then in the red zone. So there is value to be had there. Continuing on, we have Kenny Golladay, the next selection here. After going 2 very good running backs, we are going ahead and getting best available wide receivers. To me, that's Kenny Golladay. You could argue he could have gone earlier, but again, this comes down to me just saying, well, that Detroit offense, I still want to see a little bit more from them under Matt Patricia. I think Matthew Stafford definitely has the ability to pass for a boatload of yards, as we've seen before, and I do think Kenny Golladay is the main wide receiver in that offense. So I think at this point in time, a good value, especially at the flex spot. Next, we are going Sony Michel here. I love this, this pairing with Zeke, Leonard Fournette, and Sony Michel. Maybe some risky picks with Zeke and Fournette, but I think Sony Michel really kind of balances it out. The reason I have him a little bit lower here is, again, he doesn't offer much in the department of pass catchers, and I really go ahead and weigh that heavily in PPR formats if you were one-dimensional as a running back, but I just do think that he will get a lot of usage from the New England Patriots, and for that reason, I've got him going here as a flex starter. Next, we have got AJ Green, and look, I'm putting him at the bench spot because he will start off injured, and there's a lot of different reports on how much time he will miss, but I think it'll probably be between 2 to 4 weeks, something like that. So Really, I'm investing in the future here in the long term because when AJ Green returns, I do think he will be a wide receiver one, and I think that'll be very valuable. Go ahead and insert him in the flex in this for this team. Could have gone some other running backs, but I just thought the upside of getting a wide receiver one here after 2 to 3 or 4 weeks was too high to pass up on. Next, we are going Tyler Lockett for Team 6 here. A wide receiver that I'm a big fan of. Look, no more Doug Baldwin. Someone's going to have to step up, and I think Tyler Lockett showed that it could definitely be him last season. The number of receptions that he could potentially get is the only thing that's worrisome since this is PPR formats as well. Tyler Lockett, again, a wide receiver that's more so in the department of big plays down the field and doing so on limited reception. So probably getting like close to 100 yards on 3-4 receptions, which can leave a lot to be desired. But again, I do expect improvements in that category. I could potentially have him higher, but since the Seattle Seahawks are a run-first team, that's why I've got Tyler Lockett here. But again, still, I think very good value. Continuing on, we have got Aaron Rodgers, and I have loved this combination. Even though I don't have Aaron Rodgers as my second best quarterback, that's Matt Ryan. To me, I knew if I waited on Aaron Rodgers for the next round, I wouldn't be able to get him. And I love the stack of quarterback and running back, and that's exactly what we have here in Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones. That's why Rodgers makes sense to me. Continuing on, we're adding Tevin Coleman. I'm stacking up on running backs. Like I said, we got Marlon Mack, we got James White. We need more running backs. Tevin Coleman, presumed to be the starter for the San Francisco 49ers. I think Shanahan is, again, one of these head coaches that is very potent in terms of offensive performances for his squad. I think Coleman will benefit from that. So I think he's worth a selection, especially as a flex play. Next, we're selecting Evan Ingram, my next best available tight end. I think Ingram is in store for a breakout season. I said it before, with Odell Beckham no longer on the New York Giants, someone has to get those targets. And even though someone might say that it's going to be Saquon Barkley, I actually think it'll probably be either Evan Ingram or Sterling Shepard. And with a lot of those wide receivers kind of right now being banged up, I really like Ingram. I think he is a matchup nightmare. The size that he has, I think he's going to go ahead and bully a bunch of people, a good red zone target as well. So I think probably next year we might be talking about Evan Ingram as a maybe tier 1 tight end. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Next, we have got DJ Moore here. We addressed the tight end position. We addressed the wide receiver 1 position and running backs as well. So let's go with another high-end wide receiver. DJ Moore should be the number 1 wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers. I'm not sold on Curtis Samuel. I don't buy into that hype. I know the Panthers. I follow them closely. Fortunately or not, DJ Moore is a healthier and more reliable option than Curtis Samuel. I think he's going to have another big improvement. He is my second favorite year 2 wide receiver after Calvin Ridley. And as long as Cam Newton's shoulder holds up, DJ Moore should be a viable starting option. Next, we have got O.J. Howard, our next best tight end here. I like O.J. Howard. I do. I think, there's a couple tight ends we could have gone with here. But the reason I went O.J. Howard, again, probably just in terms of a safety factor. I did consider Greg Olsen here, but ultimately I decided to myself, I'm going to go with maybe a little bit less of an injury-prone guy. I'm going to go O.J. Howard, but don't worry. We're going to see Greg Olsen's name pop up in a little bit, most likely. But O.J. Howard, again, with all those targets gone in Tampa Bay, I like what he can do. The reason maybe I don't have him as high as some other people, he's also been injury prone. Cameron Brate's still there, so don't forget those factors. But as long as Winston slings it around like he did last year, I think there'll be plenty of opportunities for Howard. Then with the last pick in the 5th round, we have got Hunter Henry, another tight end here that, again, in that tier 2 category that I honestly think is probably better suited for waiting on the tight end position, skipping on the top 3 guys, loading up on other talented guys at other, running back or wide receiver categories, and then instead getting a tier 2 tight end that will still get you decent fantasy production. Hunter Henry definitely falls in that category. Again, similar to Keenan Allen, if Melvin Gordon continues holding out, I think Hunter Henry will benefit from that. A lot of people are saying, oh yeah, Mike Williams, but look, don't forget about Hunter Henry. I actually think he's the second best pass catcher on the LA Chargers. Getting to round 6, we have got our next selection, and that is Alshon Jeffery. To me, the second best pass catcher on the Philadelphia Eagles. Even though he might not play a full 16 games, I'm all right having him as a flex option, a big-bodied guy, high touchdown upside. I like Alshon Jeffery to get you right around 1,000 yards. Next, we're adding Matt Ryan here. Like I said before, Matt Ryan is my second best fantasy quarterback, so getting him here, I think, is a steal. Even though I don't really have a stack to pair him up with, I know if I waited much longer, for the 7th round, he wouldn't be available. So going Matt Ryan right now in what I think could potentially be an MVP year for him. Next, we are adding Deshaun Watson. And previously, you might have seen this be an Andrew Luck pick, but after his shocking retirement, we're going next best available quarterback. That's Deshaun Watson. I don't like him as a passer, but what he can do with his legs makes up for it. So for that reason, he is the next best available quarterback. Continuing on, we go Tarik Cohen, and as you would expect, we gotta go running backs. After selecting Melvin Gordon, the next 2 out of the 3 picks afterwards were running backs. Tarik Cohen as a pass catcher in PPR formats, I do think has value. He was one of the leaders in that category for the Bears last season. I think he can go ahead and do some damage on the ground, and having him as my flex running back, I'm all right with that. Next, we are going with Cam Newton here. Again, start to see a little bit of a run on quarterbacks, and Cam Newton expected to be healthy for week 1 to be available. So pair that up with what he can do with his legs. I like the upside here at the quarterback position. Next, we finally see that name in Greg Olsen. The reason maybe we see him coming off later than I mentioned, the teams before already had addressed the tight end position, so naturally we'd go ahead and see Greg Olsen slip down a little bit. And for everyone that's saying this is too early for Greg Olsen, look, as of right now, Greg Olsen is healthy. That's all I care about. And if Greg Olsen stays healthy for a full 16 games, he's going to be a top 5 tight end. I guarantee you that. I've been saying it since day one. He is the best pass catcher that the Carolina Panthers have, including DJ Moore, including Curtis Samuel, including Torrey Smith, including Chris Hogan. The only guy that might challenge him for that is Christian McCaffrey. But again, Greg Olsen is that big body pass catcher that the Panthers don't really have anymore after getting rid of Devin Funchess. And he's going to be a red zone target for Cam Newton. He has the most chemistry with Cam Newton, so I love Greg Olsen. Honestly, I could say that this was way too late in terms of how I've been valuing Greg Olsen up until this point to see him being selected. Next, we've got Duke Johnson, a potential sleeper running back that gained a lot of value after the Lamar Miller season-ending injury in preseason. Again, highlights, man, what do you really get out of the preseason other than injuries? But look, one player's injury is another's opportunity. Right now, I kind of have Duke Johnson slated to have a similar type of production as Lamar Miller. That's why maybe I'm not as high on him as others. I think that the Texans' offensive line still has question marks. And at this point in time, I could also very well see them adding another running back just for stability. So if that happens, and likely when it does happen, I do think Duke Johnson will lose a little bit of value. Next, we're adding a tight end to the squad. Jared Cook, my next best available tight end. After Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara, I think Jared Cook is the next best option for the New Orleans Saints. You've got Traquan Smith, Ted Ginn, but those guys I don't think are going to be as consistent as Jared Cook, who, according to reports, has impressed in camp. So I'm not mad at this pick in terms of potential. At the tight end position, after you kind of miss out on the tier 2 guys, you're looking for tight end options that are on high scoring offenses and are going to have opportunities. Jared Cook with the Saints now definitely falls in that category. Next, we go Sterling Shepard here. And I know the wide receivers might not be too sexy in terms of the names, but I think both these guys, Sterling Shepard being selected now and Tyler Boyd before, are going to be guys that have big years and take a big step forward in terms of establishing themselves as wide receivers in the NFL and in fantasy. I love the upside of Sterling Shepard. Like I said before, him and Evan Ingram are my two favorites to kind of have breakout seasons, especially with Golden Tate being suspended for the first 4 games on top of that. Next, we go Vance McDonald, continuing to fill the tight end spots. And again, you're going to see more than likely, I wouldn't go this route if this was my real draft. The only reason you're seeing these tight ends, I do want to fill out the roster. So you might see some reaches at the tight end quarterback position. But again, I'm going my next best available tight ends. So I'm at least following that perspective. But with Vance McDonald, the nice thing is no more Jesse James. With Antonio Brown gone, there will be targets to be had. You know, reports coming out of Pittsburgh saying that McDonald won't see too much more usage than what he did last year. A little bit concerning, but the opportunity should be there on an offense that I think will still be very good. Next, we are adding Jarvis Landry at the flex spot to this squad. Already have Christian McCaffrey, Mark Ingram, Antonio Brown, Adam Thielen, so I love the PPR potential on the squad. Let's add another guy in Jarvis Landry. You know, he's going to be second fiddle to Odell Beckham, but still, he is a target monster, a reception monster, a guy that's definitely more valuable in PPR formats. And rounding off this round, we have the selection of Carson Wentz. I love Wentz as a sleeper quarterback. I think he's going to be a guy, again, as long as he stays healthy, that could be in store for an MVP type year. And again, if this was going later than 8 rounds, just for the sake of the length of the video, we're keeping it to 8 rounds. I'd probably go ahead and back up Carson Wentz with another quarterback. But as of right now, we're not really doing that. We're not drafting backup quarterbacks. So Carson Wentz, we're sticking with that. And I think it'll be a good long-term play. Now getting to round 7, kind of speeding things up. We're going to be adding a lot of bench tight end players. In this case, we're going Mike Williams. Going to go ahead and wait on the tight end option. I think at this point we've gotten to a little bit of a drop, another tier drop off. So going next best available guy, Mike Williams, even though I don't love him in PPR formats, he's got that high ceiling. Put him on the bench for now. If he starts to explode and emerges as that next big LA Chargers wide receiver, you know, awesome. We'll go ahead and include him in our starting lineup. But really, this goes ahead and adds some really nice depth to this team that I already think has that to begin with. Next, we add Miles Sanders here. And in case maybe you were worried a little bit with Mark Ingram, I like the Miles Sanders selection here. I do think it'll take a little bit of time until Miles Sanders kind of gets a stranglehold on that running back position, which I do think it'll eventually happen, but I just think it'll take a little bit longer than some people might expect. That's why I'd probably say kind of pump the brakes on taking Miles Sanders as early as he's kind of going right now. I think, you know, at this point in time, 7th round, it's okay. I could even see him going a little bit later. Continuing on, we have got Baker Mayfield, and again, really good value. Baker Mayfield still on the board. Pair him up with Nick Chubb, even though Nick Chubb not really a pass catcher, so it kind of defeats the purpose of the stack. But with Duke Johnson gone, I do think Chubb will have some opportunities, even though it's not his forte. So I'm okay with the selection, even though might not get the most out of the stack. I think it's the next best available quarterback. Then speaking of quarterbacks, we're going to see that run continue here as we select Drew Brees. Even though it's a run-first offense for the Saints, Drew Brees can still get it done. He'll still put up quietly top 10 fantasy quarterback numbers, and that's exactly what we need here. We need consistency. We've got our high upside guys, so we're adding consistency to the quarterback position. Continuing on, we are adding Josh Gordon. And again, it's a little bit of a risky pick here, but as far as upside, it definitely brings it at the flex position, because if Gordon can stay healthy for the entire season and stay out of trouble and not get suspended, notice there's a lot of ifs there, then he could potentially be a steal. But I do think he will be the second or maybe even third option for Tom Brady. But again, since we drafted AJ Green earlier. I feel okay with the selection because Josh Gordon, if he does face trouble later on in the season, hopefully AJ Green will be back by then so we can insert Green into the starting lineup by that point. Next, we add Jameis Winston here. I like Jameis Winston. I like the upside. I can go ahead and say to some extent I'm all in on him. I think, again, even though this might be a team and an offense and a quarterback that might not translate to a lot of wins, I think it might translate to a lot of fantasy success. Jameis Winston, healthy, is going to take a lot of shots, opportunities, and I think that'll translate to a lot of passing yards. He can get it done on the ground with his legs, so I like the upside with Winston here. Then, continuing on, we add Allen Robinson, and again, at this point, even though I don't like Robinson, we all get to a point where, well, the value is just too good to pass up. I think that's the case here for Robinson. I like Julio Jones. I like Julian Edelman. I like Greg Olsen as far as pass catchers. Allen Robinson, I just don't like his situation. I like the player, but I hate Mitchell Trubisky as a thrower of the football. He so far has not done a good job on that. He's been a game manager. I'm not saying he can't become that. I'm not saying he can't take the next step. Fingers crossed that he can. But I'm drafting Allen Robinson for what he is, and that is the #1 wide receiver for the Chicago Bears. So in that perspective, he does bring value. Next, we're adding Austin Hooper, the next best available tight end on my board. And again, this comes down to these are not upper echelon tight ends anymore, but you draft tight ends based on their offensive situation. On the Falcons, check. So Austin Hooper makes sense. Next, we're going Austin Eckler, and I like this pick for a number of reasons. First and foremost, Melvin Gordon, we selected him earlier, so go ahead and handcuff. And if Melvin Gordon gets injured, we've got Austin Eckler. But more importantly, if Melvin Gordon holds out, I believe Austin Eckler will be that primary running back. So potentially put Melvin Gordon on the bench, put in Austin Eckler at that during that point in time. And I really like how this running back situation shaped up after waiting on that position and going wide receivers early. Continuing on here, we go Will Fuller. So we add a little bit of a stack, had Deshaun Watson, now add Will Fuller. And again, this is a situation where I'm going upside because if Will Fuller stays healthy, which he's failed to do his first few seasons, but when he has, he's been a electric playmaker. And I think, again, there's two situations that I liken to AB and Juju Smith-Schuster in Pittsburgh that we've had the last two seasons. One I said was Atlanta, but I think the second could be Will Fuller in Houston alongside DeAndre Hopkins. Next, here we add Robbie Anderson, a wide receiver that a lot of people are high on. Personally, I'm being a little bit cautious on him because, again, it's the New York Jets offense. I think Sam Darnold still has some room to improve, but you are getting a wide receiver one, so that is valuable. Here we go ahead and get Jared Goff. Get that stack with Jared Goff and Todd Gurley for the LA Rams. Very valuable. And even though maybe there were some other quarterbacks that were rated higher, I value the stack more so that's why that's the pick here. And finally, getting to our last round, rounding things off. This will go pretty fast because it'll be mostly bench players. We're going upside. Darius Geis, I think he can go ahead and be the starter for the Redskins by some point in the season. So that's why we're going with him at this point in time. Next, we go Latavius Murray. It's all about touchdown upside and being on an explosive New Orleans offense. If something, God forbids, happens to Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray could be extremely valuable. Then Marquez Valdes-Scantling, a sleeper wide receiver that I really like. I think he will be the second option on the Green Bay offense behind Davante Adams. And as long as you have a healthy Aaron Rodgers who has gone ahead and sung the praises of MVS, that is very valuable. Next, we go Kyler Murray here. We're going for upside. Kyler Murray, the rookie sensation, or at least the expected rookie sensation. I think he'll have success on the ground and through the air. So maybe we could see something similar to a Cam Newton-esque rookie season from Kyler Murray. At least that's the hope. That's why he's the selection at this point in time. Then here we go Emmanuel Sanders, and I could argue Emmanuel Sanders could be a starting wide receiver, especially in PPR formats. He's looking like he's bounced back well from his injury. Incredibly impressive coming back from that Achilles that he played in the preseason. Should be ready for week one, and he's by far the best pass catcher that the Broncos have. Next we go Christian Kirk, and another sophomore wide receiver that could potentially be in store for a big year. I'm not quite as high on him as some other people because I still think that Larry Fitzgerald has something to say about that. But in terms of ceiling, I do think Christian Kirk has a higher one than Larry Fitz. That's why he is the preferred wide receiver in my eyes. Here we go, Ito Smith, and this is a pure handcuff to Devonta Freeman. I recognize that Freeman has been injury prone, so it only makes sense to get a handcuff. I think this is one of the most important handcuffs, most valuable handcuffs you can get. Ito Smith, and pairing him up with Devonta Freeman, I think is an A+ move here. Next, we go Lamar Jackson. After waiting on quarterbacks until the last round, go best available. Go upside again. Lamar Jackson, pretty much a running back playing quarterback. So you know there's going to be some struggles, but because of what he can do as a rusher of the football, you're also going to get some success, even though he might struggle through the air. Here we go, Tony Pollard, and again, unless you really drafted Ezekiel Elliott, it's tough to justify drafting Tony Pollard in the 8th, 9th, round, especially for someone that might only be available for a game or two. Best case scenario, I would say. So right now, getting him to back him up with Ezekiel Elliott, I'm okay with this pick, even though in a couple days or a week it might be a moot point. Then going team 3, here we go, LeSean McCoy. Again, there's a lot of running backs in the Buffalo backfield, but in terms of PPR potential, I still like LeSean McCoy. Then with the second to last pick here, we go Jordan Reed. I think Reed will go ahead as long as he stays healthy, which he managed to do last season. Could go ahead and have a good performance. Hopefully, he's not in the doghouse like he was in 2018. So I like the upside from that perspective. And then finally, the last pick here, forming out the roster, we've got David Njoku. I know there's a lot of mouths to feed in Cleveland, but I'm going from the red zone perspective, the potential there, and just from the perspective that Baker Mayfield kind of looks for a lot of different targets. So Njoku can still get his opportunities as well. But with that, we wrap up this look at this 12-team full-point PPR 8-round, theoretical perfect draft. And as always, let me know what you guys thought. I'll make sure to include every single roster in the description so it's easier for you guys to go ahead and see it and compare it. Let me know which team you like the most. Let me know if you thought there were some reaches, some picks that you didn't agree with, or if you have any other fantasy football related questions, considering fantasy drafts are quickly approaching. Let me hear it in the comments section. And as always, if you guys enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in future videos.